3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Ira Weintraub on the other side, and we are joined by the MGoBlog crew. It is MGoBlog Roundtable time. And I got to tell you, fellas, I heard your predictions about this Michigan-Penn State game last week. And I got to tell you, you kind of fell short. I did too. Fall short of predicting Michigan's absolute decimation of Penn State. But I'll take it.
I said 42 points for Michigan.
What did you have for Penn State, though?
He had 27.
All right, so let's go ahead and introduce the crew, starting with the man who started it off over at MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, how are you?
Good.
Seth Fisher, who nailed almost 42 points. They had 41, so they were close. Seth, how are you?
I'm good. I am feeling pretty optimistic about Michigan's offense, obviously.
And then, of course, the venerable Craig Ross. So you heard me call him. Craig, how are you?
I'm doing fine. You know, I spent a lot of time this week listening to and watching all these football videos of the Michigan-Penn State game. And yours were phenomenal, Sam, the best by far, with Devin and Al Borges. And
you got to use their nicknames now. They have nicknames.
Oh, the Prince and the King or something like that. Some crazy crap. But Devin is ridiculous. You can tell him I said that. But he's great. But it's great fun to watch him, and he does a good job. But it made me think that what's going on here is that technology is the fundamental driver of social change. And in the mini world of looking at football, every man is becoming a cubist. I mean, it isn't just Picasso and George Braque, or Juan Gris, but it's everybody else. And so it's as if, say, Al Borges is Michelangelo and Brian Cook and Seth Fisher are, Jared Dow and Nicholas Maize becoming sort of the students of the school. And so all of a sudden you've got all this information and all of this evidence on the internet of what's going on in games. And to me, it's been fascinating, but I want Brian and Seth to talk about this.
Well, I think to me, what Brian uncovered with UFR is
he was the first.
This fan base is totally unique in their appetite for the details of the game. I don't know that you could do that with any other fan base, which is why when you say when Michigan offsets his back to the 3 receiver side, they're definitely throwing the screen. That's why they take it literally. Michigan fans take it literally and say, "Oh, they must be doing something wrong." And it's like, "Oh my God, what are we talking about here?" Brian, so when you look at the game,
yeah,
give me your take. Did you knew it was a possibility that they could blow Penn State out because they've done it before, but this, even though it was the narrowest margin in the last 4 meetings in Ann Arbor, it seemed like the most dominant turn.
Well, yeah, I mean, you rushed for over 400 yards. That was the biggest tension in the second half of the game, really. Was like, all right, is CJ Stokes going to put us over? And he did. Good job. But so it's a Manny Diaz defense, right? And Manny Diaz defense is gambling. So they're going to slant and they're going to blitz from places and they're going to do some weird formational things. And if you don't know what you're looking at, then you can be in trouble. But in this game, it was Penn State who didn't know what they were looking at. So I know Devin already addressed this, but the 2 long touchdown runs, both of them had a lot to do with J.J. McCarthy's legs, because on the Corum one, you got a cornerback who's just hanging out. Even as Corum's crossing the line of scrimmage, he's just hanging out, checking the quarterback. And then the critical linebacker who's supposed to come from the backside and hold it down, he hesitates on the Edwards one. And that's because in the first half, Michigan should have had 2 pretty long touchdowns for McCarthy, but the blocking didn't quite work out. And I think they probably went in at halftime and they were like, okay, this was real close to being 2 long touchdowns for McCarthy, so we got to focus on him. And then as soon as you do that, I mean, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards are just too good, and the blocking was just too good.
Seth?
Yeah, I mean, I went through all that in the next Sharpies too. It was just they set it up for over a long period of time, and they gambled, um, trying to shut down trying to scrape exchange and whatnot. And Michigan had answers for those too. So this was like the culmination of like all these concepts that we've just been talking about over since maybe 2018, right? Where they bring out the arc package and they got split zone and they've got all this power game. The other thing is that Penn State guys were gambling by going upfield all over the place, and that was just weird. Like, I don't know why that was your answer to Michigan, because most teams will just try to stay in front of them because it's power, right? And like, okay, give up whatever they're physically going to push you, but no more than that. Penn State was like opening up big gashes because they're just shooting up into gaps.
I
And
mean,
a lot of
that's
times you see a guy shoot up and he gets escorted by, and like, okay, now we're in business.
but that's what Diaz wants to do. Like, he's always been a guy who's just like, we're gonna trade chunks for tackles for loss.
Mhm.
And they just, I mean, they had a few here and there in this game, but they just got so consistently gashed that, and honestly, it should have been worse. Like, there were a couple incidents that were just like, oh man, that was one block away from a 50-yard touchdown. So this is his first season at Penn State. His defense doesn't really look like they know what they're doing. They don't have the level of talent that they usually have at linebacker. But 400 yards against a team that was overrated in terms of statistics and run defense coming in, but is a real Big Ten defense that has PJ Mustipher. They have some talent on that front seven, and Michigan just left him in the dust. And one of the things that I thought was pretty nice is that there was a McCarthy run that went for 8 yards, and then Michigan comes back and just goes power right at the same side, catches Penn State in a scrape exchange and just blows it out. And that's another chunk for Edwards. And just the sequencing in this game and the play calling, I think, was really encouraging. Even if they threw for the first time out a pistol on the first play of the game and they didn't even run play action, what are we doing?
Here's the thing. So, as much as we highlight the sheer physical dominance, it stuck out to me that at no point in that game could James Franklin or Manny Diaz, they couldn't figure out how to stop him one time, how to slow him down at any turn, except in the red zone. I mean, they made some plays in the red zone, but really that was your defense. Hey, man, maybe we can get them to they get to the red zone and we can figure out some pressures, and the field is constricted, and we can maybe get off the field that way. But think about when they went unbalanced.
Right once down there. But I think Michigan, like they had the throw to Edwards, like that was going to be a touchdown.
That was a
That was just
touchdown.
missed, right?
Yeah, and honestly, the down G that got blown up, that's on Corum. Because you got a guy 2 yards in the backfield, and El Hadi's doing a decent job with him. If he cuts that up, he's at least getting back to the line of scrimmage. He's probably getting to the one, and honestly, he's probably getting in the end zone.
So they didn't even stop him there, right? I mean,
no, it was just like sometimes
there.
Michigan didn't have a perfect game, and that was the only reason they didn't score touchdowns.
Right. So, and my point is, you see that, you see there are times. I mean, they didn't have they broke out this unbalanced power that Penn State couldn't even get lined up to. I mean, there was one time the linebacker steps to the line of scrimmage and he's pointing like, where are our defensive linemen, right? So you had the physical domination, and then you had the coaching dominance too, where you just saw a coach in James Franklin, when the camera panned to him, the look on his face was, I don't have a clue how to stop this. And you saw that on the field, Craig.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting that there's a guy over at Penn State who does video reviews similar to what's going on here, and he was very reticent to lay much on the Penn State coaching.
Oh my God.
Yeah, which I thought was I thought was some denial, but he kept saying that all that happened in this game was that Michigan's motion created more gaps, and that sort of Penn State defense didn't respond to the new gaps that were being created by Michigan's motion. And I thought, Okay, yeah, the motion. They haven't seen motion all year. They
That's
haven't
what
seen.
Michigan does.
That's what.
That's the
Not just
offense.
Michigan. That's
Well,
what. And to me, I mean, yeah, there was some of that, but the truth is, they had guys moving in the wrong direction. Even their really good players, like the corner from Cass Tech, a
Jalen King.
great player.
Jalen
Yeah,
King.
he's a
well,
great player.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
not organized, right? So there's
that's
that.
yeah, exactly.
There's like Michigan's running like the double arc, and you got two Penn State players biting on the run inside. So there's two Michigan tight ends out in space against one safety for a touchdown,
Yeah.
and the safety makes a play,
Makes a
which is
play.
brilliant.
Yeah. Oh my
I'm
God.
like, so
luck.
like they are biting on stuff when it's not even their job. So they're not very well coached. I think they're going to have a pretty harsh reality check the second half of the season, and Michigan's not going to rush for 400 yards in probably another game. So, like, if they had hired Greg Schiano, if Greg Schiano had come loose and it was now the Penn State defensive coordinator, they'd be much better off than they are now. But that's not the case. I just feel like once you have the established quarterback run game, and that's like not the focus of what you do, but it's part of what you do, it's just incredibly difficult to defend everything because they had to leave a safety back because they were afraid of Roman Wilson, and they had to check Blake Corum, and then you got JJ McCarthy popping out, and it's just like you can't defend all that. And so I have some sympathy for Diaz, even if I didn't think his team was very well coached, because like the amount of stuff Michigan was throwing at you and running it all very competently, that's just tough to keep up with.
It is, and yet you're supposed to have some guys on it. You're supposed to be able to stop them one time, right? You got enough talent.
They stopped it one time. When?
The
Pick six.
Six.
All right. Well, that was a bust on Michigan.
Yeah.
That was a bust on Michigan because I remember, and I had to ask Borges about this at the game. You're running a slide in the direction that you have the tight end blocking out. You almost have to cut JJ some slack because you're blocking a guy into where he's rolling and where he's trying to throw the ball. So, I mean, the tight end, and I had to ask about it, like because Borges didn't. He said, the play structure seems kind of messed up, kind of funky here. So I asked about it, and the tight end's supposed to block down on that play, which makes more sense, right? But
Right.
it required a bust on Michigan's part for them to make a play. And so
they did it, Sam. They did it.
you couldn't do anything in that game. And so here's what happens though, guys. And you tell me where you are on this. Now the goalposts get moved. We're talking about how poorly coached Penn State is, right? James Franklin is talking about, well, we need to recruit better. We need to recruit bigger guys, as if he didn't recruit the guys on the team. Like, what are we talking about?
No, he wants to redesign the tunnel. That's the problem that he identified for this game.
These are your guys. So the finish line gets moved. Penn State's overrated. What do you think? Is Penn State really overrated, or is Michigan just that good?
I think it's a combination. Like, no self-respecting defense can give up 400 yards in a game and not reevaluate like how good they actually are, right? But as I mentioned, like, Michigan is able to throw a ton of stuff at you and they run it all well. Like you were talking about a bus. Like, how many other missed assignments were there in this game? Not many. And the sheer quantity of things Michigan, like they're running gap stuff, they're running inside zone, they're running duo, they'll throw in the occasional outside zone. They got bash, they're running pin and pulls. Like the whole of modern football run game, it was present here, and missed assignments were very thin on the ground. So it's some of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think Al in your session, Sam said they ran duo 12 times, pin and pull 7 times. They ran 4 arc zones, or he calls them bluffs, 5 split zones. He ran power, and he said, quote, power was lethal to Penn State in this game. And so, yeah, Michigan's running a whole lot of stuff, and they're running it by and large reasonably well. And mostly where in this game, I think Brian said, and I think it's right, it could have been worse. I mean, JJ misses the easy screen throw to Donovan Edwards on the goal line. The Corum play, where I agree with Brian, he can cut up on that and walk into the end zone. And that what happened here in this game was Michigan making mistakes, which is bizarre in the context of a game that they just completely demolished Penn State.
I mean, when you're dominating a team that much, there's really nothing else you can point at except for mistakes. Now, college football teams make mistakes. That's just going to happen.
Right.
But like, we didn't even talk about the other side of the ball, and I just got done doing that, and like, that was a coaching blowout as well. Like, Minter just had them all over the place. I think it was one of my highest rock paper scissors scores. Where like they were Penn State. And maybe this just goes back to Michigan's schedule this year, where we just really haven't had a team that scared us that much until this week, because Michigan was so prepared for, they knew exactly what a Manny Diaz defense does. They were ready for them to shoot up their gaps and push them by. And that's not how Michigan normally blocks things. They were ready to mess with their how they do their gaps, and they messed up their rules entirely. Like, I can't tell you how many times a Penn State guy did not spill and they have a linebacker moving outside. And then on the other side of the ball, it's the same thing. Like, Penn State goes to do something and Michigan is absolutely ready for it. There's a Sean Clifford attempt where Penn State does this every game. They put a bunch of guys to all out wide. Then they run the running back out there too. And the idea is to get just 4 or 5 guys in the box against Sean Clifford, and Clifford then makes a run. And Michigan is just so prepared for this thing. They're slanting. Maize Smith just kind of shoves a couple guys past him. He takes on the polar, and Michigan's slanting right beside there, and Jalen Harrell makes tackle in the backfield. And it's like, there is no way that play is going to work. And Michigan they're ready for it. They had it all scouted. They'd seen it all on tape, and they were prepared for it. It was astounding how well prepared Michigan was for this game.
Yeah, I remember coming out of the Indiana game, hearing Vance talk about disguises, and he said, one of the best things about early in the season was, it's not just the pressure, it's the way they disguise it. And he said we didn't see as many disguises against Indiana, and I remember thinking, well, why is that? What was it about Indiana? And I just think that it was a part of keeping a little something in the toolkit, because the pressure disguises against Penn State. They didn't know when he was bringing pressure, and when he brought it, they didn't know where it was coming from. I mean, it was mercy. It's like raising my hand, like I can't stop beating on my behind. I can't. We can't do this. The one play that they did make, and this was one time where it was sort of a mistake by Michigan in the long run for Sean Clifford, and it was the post safety, because they made their tackle, great individual effort to block Barrett on the scrape exchange. That play is going to get 10, 12 yards. It shouldn't have gotten 60, but your safety bites on the dive, right? But that was like one really good play. But other than that, you wouldn't know Nick Singleton is this guy we've been talking about, right? You wouldn't know that they have any explosiveness offensively at all, because they made like one in the fade, and they made the fade. They threw the fade. Yeah. That was it. That's all they had all day.
Well, I mean, one reason that they didn't disguise a lot against Indiana is that if you put 4 kittens on your defensive line, 3 of them would sack Connor Bazelak. So there wasn't really a whole lot of need. But Penn State is a different level, obviously. Like their left tackle is a guy who's getting NFL hype in after 6 starts, and I think that's pretty realistic. And then it felt like Michigan was not going all out after Clifford, because the most dangerous thing about the Penn State offense is when Clifford's improvising.
Yeah.
And I mean, they had those receivers locked down. They had the running backs locked down. I mean, Jake Moody had Nick Singleton locked down.
It's a great tackle.
Great
tackle. A question for you guys on their long play on the Clifford run. It's clear that the safety has bid on the running back and isn't in the right spot, but could Barrett have handled that a little better? Didn't he get upfield too far?
Barrett, no, because Barrett's job is to angle towards the quarterback. Like, if you remember when we were all excited about Don Brown, there was a play with BC versus Notre Dame where like both the linebacker and the defensive end meet the running back and quarterback at the same time. That was the play call we had.
Well, so Barrett's got to keep contain,
Right.
because if he loses contain, you get a big play. And so his main responsibility there is to make sure the quarterback goes inside of him, and then someone else from the defense has to rally. And given the play call and the yardage situation, it's reasonable that linebackers bury themselves in the line and you get your first down. But as Sam said, the reason that it broke big was Broadmoor getting out of position. So Barrett, to me, did what he needed to do, and then the great play from the left tackle.
Yeah, it was a
I
great
almost
block.
thought
He saw because they're doubling. The tackle and guard are doubling on a 3-tech, and 3-tech leaves right now. He leaves right away. And so that frees the tackle up. He has to be thinking on his feet, and he immediately went for Barrett, who I initially thought, and Vance corrected this as well. I said, well, maybe he didn't come tight enough. And he did. The guy just made a block. Sometimes, I mean, they have scholarship guys too. And sometimes their guys just make plays.
Yeah,
that
That
guy was good.
That guy made a play.
And the
that guy's good.
awareness
Oh,
to
Shanu.
see that there's no second level, and that if there's no second level, something's wrong, and you need to go find someone to block. That's pro stuff right there. So it was really nice.
One time all day though, and even that was about a Michigan mistake. So, man, this was as good as an effort as you could have hoped for heading into the bye. Again, you guys mentioned the tunnel. We got to raise this. So James Franklin, he's after the game. He's embarrassed. It was a halftime where it was still a game, surprisingly, and there's a little dust up in the tunnel, right? So after they get their asses kicked, now he's in the press conference talking about the tunnel and how big a problem it's going to be. Now, you guys are some Michigan historians. You can tell me, in the 100 years of Michigan Stadium, has there ever been a major tunnel issue between teams? I ask this because he is contending now that there's going to be a major issue moving forward after 100 years, it seems to me, of no issue. So, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I need to consult the historians. Is there a record of a tunnel issue at Michigan Stadium, Seth, Brian?
It was not between. All right, so the Michigan Ohio State got in a dust up last year in the tunnel, but prior to that, the biggest incident that ever happened was not between the teams, but between fans, because 1941 Michigan State fans got in the building and started running all around the field, and then got into the tunnel, and it was just a mess. Like it took an hour to clean all these creeps out. So I mean, the lesson of that is not like the tunnel is the problem. The problem is never invite Michigan State back into your building. But that's the only real incident they ever had was that
Also,
1941 brawl.
we need to get the nomenclature right about what happened here. There was an article that was like, "Oh, James Franklin talks about fight in Michigan Tunnel." That wasn't a fight.
Was it a fight?
If the worst thing that happens is someone throws a sandwich, it's not a fight, right? It's like you could call it maybe a fracas or a kerfuffle. I think kerfuffle is right. Whenever there's like
Could be a
some
food
guys,
fight.
no, it's like and it's like, okay, so there were some people yelling at each other in the tunnel. Was it spicy? Yes, it was. Does that mean it's better? Yes, it does. But anything that is spicy is good. So the tunnel, everybody should have one tunnel, and there should always be woofing. Like until someone starts throwing a projectile that is not soft and delicious, we're gonna let it ride.
I agree with you, man. It's he's actually talking. He's spending press conference time on this. And if I'm a fan of Penn State, I'm like, man, you talk about deflection. You don't want us to focus on Michigan just beat your behind badly. They abused you. And your answer is we got to recruit better. As if, like I said, as if you didn't recruit the guys on this squad. Come on, man. Stop it. Stop it. But hey, that's James Franklin for you.
You're absolutely right. I mean, as opposed to talking about the game or what happened or the coaching deficiencies, he's going to say, well, our players just aren't good enough. And two, what about the tunnel? Right.
What are you supposed to say after you give up 400 yards rushing?
Well,
like if I was in a press conference after my team gave up 400 yards rushing, I'd be talking about anything except football. Yeah. The tunnel, the Nintendo Switch, whatever it is,
Hey man,
I'd be
you know
like,
what I would do? I'd be honest. I was woefully inept, and you know why I feel confident in that. My check is still going to clear. You just signed me to a
That's
10-year
right.
deal. I'm fine. And they got to pay me anyway. So I'm gonna at least be honest. I'm not going to insult the intelligence of my fans unless he just thinks they're that stupid. I don't know. Maybe that says something too. But he was just totally acting like I'm not respect. He did that before with his when they were losing recruits. And he said, yeah, we got to recruit better, as if to say the guys in the class. He had to address that with the
Well, I
guys
mean,
that were in the class saying, we got to recruit better. What about us, coach? Now, guys are actually on the team. And he's saying we have to recruit better, as if they were the issue. If you can't come up with one thing to tell me as a player, to come up with one stop in the game, that's a you problem, not a me problem. And not one time did they make one adjustment to fix anything on the field that day. You would think they would be able to slow down one rushing effort on one drive. They could never do it.
Yeah, I mean, how hard would it be to come out and say, "Hey, they kicked our asses"? One,
Thank you.
two, two. Uh, I love my players. I think we've got good players here. I think we, did not do the greatest job of scouting or putting together a plan against Michigan. But the season isn't over for us. We still have big games, and we think we can do better going forward. How about that? How
That's
hard
not
is
right.
that?
You,
You
you
should
know,
be his
you know what,
PR.
James? You know what, James? If your players are the problem, send them back. You got a couple guys from Cast Tech, send them back.
Yeah, we'll
so
take the
We'll
King
take
kid.
them.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
the press corps actually has a big hand in this too.
Mhm.
So like when Penn State reporters ask for James Franklin about stuff, it's always like, well, what conspiracy theory can we come up with today? And Michigan reporters are like, what happened on that down G? Why didn't you block it right?
Why are you tipping your bubble screens? They ask questions like that. Like, come on, man.
Yeah. And then the Michigan State press is just like, oh, what can I do today to soothe your feelings?
All right, we got to get to a break. As we do, speaking of Michigan State, because we'll segue into the Spartans, and we'll spend the whole time next week talking about it. But mileage out of a player between Mel Tucker and the mileage from Kenneth Walker and James Franklin and the mileage from Saquon Barkley, I contend that other than for a non-quarterback, those may be the two biggest examples that I can remember of a coach riding the coattails of a player to significant financial benefit. Both of those guys seem to me their accomplishments were based on those two guys. What say you?
I mean,
Yes.
Penn State's offensive coordinator was as much to do with that as Barkley. They weren't getting anything with Barkley until they had Moorhead, right?
I think both guys had a hand in that.
Yeah. I mean, Barkley was amazing, but like Joe Moorhead was when their offense was great, when they were just like, oh my God, I can't. That's so brilliant to make Rashawn Gary jump upfield that way. Like that was Joe Moorhead, and that's
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
what Franklin's done. He surrounded himself with good coaches in the past.
yeah, I think you're right, Sam, and it shows you what goes on in recruiting and why coaches are willing, uh, perhaps, to figure out how many dollars they can give to recruit A or
Right?
recruit B, because it's chump change vis-a-vis what that coach may ultimately receive.
No doubt.
And if you're getting like 95 million of guaranteed monies, uh, you're willing to do a lot.
What did Franklin have? He had a few great coordinators. He had Brent Pry on defense until just recently, right? And like Manny Diaz is his hire because like that guy was head coach in Miami, but Diaz is a whole thing. And I mean Brent Pry was the real deal. And like they had a good defense because Brent Pry had them organized. He had good recruits. He recruited to their system. They had what was his name? Banks, the guy who was doing the defensive backs for them until he went to Tennessee. Like
Tim
they
Banks.
yeah, I mean they had some real dudes in that staff, and like they were coming into Michigan and taking our guys because people want to play for those dudes. And I think that keeping Franklin, which is the weakest part of that whole organization, is it was probably the worst idea they could have had.
Yeah. All right,
I
we need to
mean,
get to a break. We're gonna switch gears and get over into the Spartans. As far as the run game is concerned, they're toothless, but they have talent at the receiver position. But this game last week, I don't know how much you guys watched it. I just thought it was a race to see who could be the most inept, right? And Michigan State happened to be a little less inept than Wisconsin. They wound up coming out on top. We will dive into that. Start previewing the matchup on the other side here. MGoBlog Roundtable on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, the ticket.
Clear on the radio.
Yeah, Mertz is worse than I thought. I
Mertz
mean,
is terrible.
Oh
I-
gosh.
I couldn't believe I'm watching that game, and there was one play. It was a beautiful play action pass, and he drops back, and he's like, "There must be someone wide open, right?" Because he lets go of the ball very quickly after the fake.
Yeah.
And there's not a Wisconsin receiver in the frame. They're just two Michigan State guys, and it hits one Michigan State guy in the hands. He can't catch it. It hits the other Michigan State guy in the hands. He can't catch it, and still there's no Wisconsin receiver in the frame. I don't know who he was even throwing the football to.
Yeah, they're a mess right now. I just don't know. And I wonder if Jim Leonard can even hang on there, because it isn't clear to me they're going to win a whole lot of games. Even
Yeah, man. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how the fan base is going to react to a game like that, and maybe other games like that going forward. But Mertz, you know, boy, that when they got Mertz, I know Wisconsin fans, they just thought this was it. We finally got this 4-star / 5-star quarterback, whatever he was. And he hasn't done it for him at all. I mean, Jack Cohn was better there for sure, among others.
It's almost like they flew too close to the sun. Like they were Wisconsin, they were doing Wisconsin things, and all of a sudden, like they try to have a quarterback too. Like, no, Wisconsin, you can't do that. You can't be Wisconsin and have a quarterback. That's just not right.
Is it possible to see a 3,500-yard, 30 TD season by a QB under Harbaugh at Michigan, or a 1,000-yard season by a wide receiver? Used to think so. Now I don't.
No, our schedules are too weak. Right? Like
I
we're
mean-
gonna run the back half of the games because like they keep on playing all these turkeys at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I don't know if I care about that very much.
Need more
but-
JJ runs in the red zone. What do you think about that one?
I mean, in the red zone, you can bring down the safety, so it's actually a little bit harder to run, QB stuff. Because part of that whole game is, they have safeties back, so they just don't have enough guys if you add the QB to the run game. Well, once you're compressed, now it's just more about, getting your blocks in and everything. I thought that play, the 2-point conversion was brilliant, because they'd already run Edwards outside. I know they missed the throw, but they've got 2 tight ends out there, and, the cornerback's the only guy who can make the play, and he's got to maintain outside. So, once Ronnie Bell has that ball, it's just over. And the way that they'd set that up, I thought was just beautiful. I wish they maybe used that to score 4 points instead of 2, but that was my only complaint.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, the comment up about listening to Franklin. I mean, it's like Franklin took lessons from Tom Izzo.
Right.
I mean, it was pathetic. So I have a question, Sam, for you we're losing, I assume, 2 of our 3 corners next year.
Yeah, man, it's a tough one.
And we're not recruiting at corner at all right now.
So
or
yeah,
is
yeah,
there-
they are. Yeah, they are.
they are?
So I'm still digging on
Mhm.
Chris Peel. The kid.
I assume they lost him already. But that's not true.
So they were trending pretty tough. I think tougher than a lot of the SEC fans were letting on. He did really like Georgia, but they were saying he was going to visit Georgia again, and he didn't make it when they said he was going to make it. They
Back
have
on
3
radio in
big
about 20 seconds, guys.
They have 3 big time corners in the class.
Right.
Michigan, I know, was feeling really, really good about it. I know that's one of the schools they were getting down to this week. So I'm gonna be checking into it today and tomorrow to kind of see where they think things stand. And then the other kid is Jair Hill, who was just on campus last week.
Stand
They're
by,
in a
guys.
battle. they're in a battle with Illinois for.
It feels
Right.
like a
King,
tough
come on
one
home.
right now.
Coming back, guys.
All
Back
right.
on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Ira Weintraub. On the other side, before we get back to the MGoBlog Roundtable, I want to tell you about the great deals to be had over at Brighton Ford. Get on board with Brighton Ford by going to 1-800-NEW-FORD, making it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. Or, again, BrightonFord.com, 1-800-NEW-FORD, new 2022 Ford F-150 Super Crew. You can get into one of those for $467 a month with $2,000 down, or $531 a month with $500 down. How about a 2022 Ford Escape SE all-wheel drive, $366 a month with $2,000 down, or $429 a month with $500 down. And last but not least, the 2022 Ford Bronco Sport Big Bend, $480 a month with $2,000 down, or $544 a month with $500 down. For those and other great deals, get on board with Brighton Ford by going to BrightonFord.com. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD and make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. So, Brian Cook, Michigan State will play Michigan better than Penn State. True or false?
True, I guess, because it'd just be hard to be as bad as Penn State was. And Michigan's going to come into this game and they're going to be like, all right, we ran for 400 yards against this team. Against Penn State, we're going to try to do it again. And that might not be the best way to attack Michigan State, because their secondary, Graham Mertz notwithstanding, is horrible. Horrible. So, to me, if you have the confidence in JJ to let him drop back at home, go after the secondary in the first half, you're going to score 21, 28 points in that half. But one thing that Michigan State has proven is that if you want to line up and smash mouths at the 1 yard line, they can deal with that. And that was without Jacob Slade, who's come back. They got Xavier Henderson back last week. So I think their defense is going to perk up a little bit, because they've been missing a number of really important pieces. So, and, ever since, they lost to Washington, they've been prepping for this game and this game alone, probably because they knew that their season wasn't going anywhere. So what are they going to do? They're going to try to win their Super Bowl. And I think Michigan is going to be pretty prepared for that, because they haven't had exactly a whole lot of tests so far either. But, Michigan State's always going to come up for this game and play their asses off. And hopefully this year they're so bad it won't matter.
Yeah, I think back to last year's game, guys, and I think the most surprising thing to me was how well their front seven played Michigan's run. In retrospect, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense for any team to sell out against the run, right? But it exposed their secondary. And every guy had a career day against Michigan State secondary last year. And if you have a quarterback worth the salt, there are going to be some openings. So if history is an indicator, Seth, it would seem that Brian is spot on, that, yeah, you go in looking to establish a run like always, and you have a quarterback, more imminent quarterback run threat this year that would make you feel more confident, even more confident in it. But, man, the meat on the bone is in the passing game in this one, it would seem.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they still have the same guys in the secondary. Like Brian mentioned, they got Xavier Henderson back, but I mean, he's a good run defender. He's not a good pass defender. He's just not fast enough, right? I mean, the guy's been out there for a long time, but he just doesn't have the speed. Now, they did reconfigure their defense against Wisconsin. I thought this was interesting. Jacoby Windman was the UNLV linebacker. They were playing him at defensive end all year. And then they were playing Ben Van Sumeren, we all remember him, as their other linebacker. So they moved Windman back to linebacker, which is where he's better. He's actually a pretty good coverage guy, and he's a linebacker. And then they are starting Zion Young, who's a true freshman at defensive end. He's kind of like the guy that, he was a little underrated, but like he's 6'6", 260. Like he can play. But they've got these young defensive ends now, and they're not really sure what they have there. So maybe you can kind of play with that. I would stay the heck away from Jacob Slade, because he dominated them last year. And then in the secondary, they're throwing out Dylan Tatum now. If everyone remembers him from West Bloomfield, and I think Michigan is as familiar with him as anybody because Ron Bellamy coached him and Michigan recruited him, and they know exactly who he is. And the rest of the guys, like Charles Brantley is not a great corner. Amir Speed is that guy from Georgia who was not playing in Georgia, and we saw why last year. Angelo Gross came back as their other safety. So, I mean, all their players are in the front seven, except for Xavier Henderson, who's also a run stopper. So it's obvious where you attack these guys.
Yeah. The big difference between this year and last year is probably Kenneth Walker, and the fact that MSU's run game this year has been not great. The guys they replaced Walker with are not Walker, and I don't see them having great success running the ball. I mean, they're going to have to win with Thorne throwing it. I think Thorne is a good quarterback. I think he's a lot better than Mertz. And I think Reed is a good wide receiver, and that poses some problems for Michigan, but not if you're one-dimensional. I think you can't come in and win with a one-dimensional game. On the other hand, I mean, last year I think Cade threw for 350 yards, 380 yards against them, and I suspect this year that State's going to come in. They're going to sell out to the run, and they're going to, Michigan's going to have number 9 beat him and probably beat him with his arm.
Yeah.
Now Michigan can do that, and I suspect they will do that. But I, as to your initial question, I think they'll play Michigan tougher than Penn State did, because as Brian points out, 3 kittens and a bag of cereal would have probably played better.
Well, I mean, the thing is that if you look at what they've done on the ground on both sides of the ball this year, Michigan should just obliterate this team. They've given up 5 yards a carry to Minnesota, Maryland, and Ohio State. Their offense, they have played 5 games against Power 5 teams. They have cracked 3 yards a carry in 1 game, that against Maryland. They got a total of 7 rushing yards against Ohio State, 42 against Washington, 38 against Minnesota, and 99 against Wisconsin. That's, I mean, without a historic turnaround on both lines, this is going to be similar to the Penn State game in that it just looks like a high school team playing a college team. I mean, Slade might be a big difference. Like, he is a really good player. And so that could be something that changes what's happening. But if you're flinging freshman defensive ends in mid-season because your run game isn't up to par, that's not going to help. So go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
They're scrambling for answers, and I don't think they're going to get them over the bye week.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear they can't run the ball. This game, their opportunity here is they have talent at receiver. And Peyton Thorne, he's taking a beating, but he will stand in there, and he can deliver some dimes downfield at the time. We saw him do it on 4th down against Michigan last year, right?
Yeah, they're the best 4th and 12 team I've ever seen.
Right. So they have some weapons. So you hope you can take advantage of Michigan through the air in spots, knowing that your quarterback is going to take some punishment, but get back up. And then on the other side, can you force Michigan to be in a position where they have to win it on JJ's arm? That probably is still a recipe for disaster as far as I'm concerned for them. But that's really their only hope. And so one of the listeners said Mentor needs to be ready for tempo and phase. And I think that is a very astute observation. We saw tempo bother Michigan last year because they tried to substitute. This year, that hasn't been as much of a theme as being assignment sound against tempo. But in this last game against Penn State, they tried to substitute against tempo and got a penalty. So if they can take care of that, tighten up against fade balls, which we saw them get hit on a couple of times the last few weeks, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for Michigan State.
Yeah, they're going to have trick plays. They're going to have a throw to the quarterback, and Jaden Reed is legit. So I mean, this is going to be a real test for the cornerbacks. Or like Mike Samerstill is going to get on him too. I mean, that's just what Michigan State does, right? They're going to go out there. They're going to play the random number generator, and State. That's really the best thing they've got going for them is they're incredibly lucky. They get calls. They get they connect on 4th and 6 when they throw a fade. They do low percentage things and they work out for them. And like, we've been sitting around waiting for,
I mean,
Carmen to hit them upside
what's
the
the
head, and it's just not
what's
happening.
the definition of working out? Because they're 3-4 and not going to a bowl game. So, like, I don't know how well it's working out. One thing of note is that Michigan's a number 3 team in the country in yards per attempt given up. So this pass defense, I mean, they haven't played a ton of great quarterbacks, but how scared of you are of Jaden Reed versus Mike Sainristil? Not really, right? Like, he'll probably make some yards, but it's going to take him a number of targets to get there. And if you want him to do anything significant, well, he's going to have to sit back in that pocket, and Michigan's going to get after it. And they use Thorne on the ground because they have really no other alternative. And there have been a couple of games this year where he's looking a little bit Sean Clifford-esque by the 3rd or 4th quarter, where he just takes too many hits. So if Michigan State wants to be in this game, I think they're going to have to get off to a quick start, because playing from behind is not going to work.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Michigan will be able to get after Thorne, particularly where the Michigan State ground game is unlikely to be much. I think the Michigan State's best chance of gaining yards on the ground is scrambles by Thorne, and not their sort of organic running game. So.
Yeah, man, Mike Sainristil has been a revelation, man.
Yeah, has he? I mean,
Yeah.
has he really been much different than Dax Hill?
Yes.
So I wanted to get you guys to take on. So wait, pause, because I asked Vance this question, because he was, I mean, the dude was just, and understandably so, gaga over Dax. He's like, man, Dax is great, Dax great, Dax great. And so I put the question to him last week: who's the best player on defense? My contention is this Mike Morris. He's been balling. He said, okay, that's a good call, but he said, I got to throw Lil Mike in there. He calls him Lil Mike. He said, Lil Mike has been a baller. He expanded on that this week.
Oh, really?
And he sort of concurred with a take that was coming out of spring ball. So I remember talking to some players and even some coaches that were saying, hey, yeah, we might not have the box presence that we had with Dax, because Dax is just this amazing all-around guy with his athleticism. But we feel like, from a coverage perspective, at least, we will not be taking a step back with Mikey. And I'm thinking to myself at the time, man, I mean, he knows he's a receiver. He knows the offense. He knows the other guys. He knows their tendencies. Before I buy that, I got to see it against other competition. Well, through 7 games, guys, it really seems like that wasn't just, coach speak or practice talk. He's been able to translate that to the field, and Vance took it a step further. He said, from a coverage perspective, just man-to-man coverage, he said, I can make the argument that I think that Mikey has been better in just pure man-to-man coverage. Now, he said he's not the better all-around player. Dax every day of the week and twice.
No argument here. I've been charting this
guy, but coverage, he said, I think Mikey, you can make an argument he's been better. What say you guys?
Yeah, you got no argument here. I mean, Stainerstil's charting better than Dax Hill did as a coverage guy. I mean, Dax would have a couple coverage busts per game, or one or two. Dax was incredible, but like Stainerstil, we had an argument on the podcast about whether, like, the play call on 4th and 6 when they throw a corner route to Parker Washington, and Brian's like, oh, you got man coverage, you got the right angle, that's not a bad play. And I'm like, well, it is if you're throwing it at Mike Sainristil, because that guy.
Well, that ball went right through the wide receiver's hands, so it had to be in a great place, and it wasn't a great place. Also, Michigan's defense on that was a zero coverage that was specifically designed to blow up mesh. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, I mean, that's not a terrible play call.
No, it wasn't a terrible play call. It was just Mikey Sainristil takes it away.
No, it went through the receiver's hands.
Yes, it went through his hands, but that was the only way he could have caught that, because what he had to do was slow up
with his hands. That is the only way he could have.
Brian,
I get what you're saying.
Stop. The way that one works out is like Parker Washington. He's running. Sainristil's running his route for him. Sainristil's getting a leg in front of him. Okay, he's about to PBU this. So Parker Washington is your receiver. The only option you have at that point is to slow up and then reach out. So he has to make a diving catch. And the reason his hand doesn't get up just in time is because it's actually bumping Samerstill's helmet on the way up. So like when I'm
Yeah,
going through frame by frame and saying like, how does that play happen? Yes, it ends up going through his hands, and we got the shot and it goes through his hands. He could have made a great play. You're
this is
asking
it.
someone to make
This
that great of a play to beat it.
This is the point that encapsulates what both of you guys are saying. In essence, it had to be an absolute perfect ball to Seth's point, to Brian's point. It was as close to perfect as it could be, and it could not be hauled in. I mean, that's the kind of coverage that you've been getting from Mikey Samerstill this year. And so I gotta at least to this point, I gotta concede that, because I remember when they told me that, I was like, man, come on. It's like, this is some practice stuff if I ever heard it. Now I gave it a little more life because players were co-signing, right? Sometimes coaches tell you something, you're like, come on, man, come on. And you and the same thing with the players, and you want to hear it from the other side. And they both were saying the same thing. Even still, I'm like, well, before you go that far, I want to see what happens against another team. And he's been doing it. He's been a revelation, as has this pressure, man. I mean, you see so many guys that are able to make great individual plays. I mean, the play that you talked about with Jalen Harrell, I mean, man, to make that stop on Clifford in the backfield, it's like you're seeing guys across the board make plays like that. Maybe not every game other than Mike Morris, but someone else is showing up, on a game-by-game basis, whether it's Harrell or Iyabi. Someone else is really making a box play that stands out.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of there's no star on the defense, but it is a defense by committee that's working out pretty well right now. And we'll see if that stands up against the acid test at the end of the year. But so far, looks like Michigan has a defense that's not much of a drop off from last year, if it is at all.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's another thing that I doubted. I want you to finish your thought, Brian. Because Harbaugh said that, and I'm like, come on, man. But Brian, that's what it looks like, right?
I mean, they're not as good at defensive end as they were, but the drop off isn't as big as I thought it was going to be, because Mike Morris is really playing better than I expected. Like, I thought he was going to be Chris Wormley, and he's been much more consistent as a pass rusher. So you get, Jamon Green's keeping Will Johnson on the bench. You got 3 safeties who you think are playable. You got an injury at linebacker that is causing minor issues, but you got depth at defensive tackle now. You have 4 defensive tackles that I think you can play. And that hasn't been the case for Michigan in 3 or 4 years. And when it was the case, their defense was so much better. I mean, it's just so game-changing to be able to put in a fresh Mozzie Smith in the 3rd or 4th quarter, because you've got enough depth to put Mason Graham and Rayshon Benny out there and get him enough breathers that he's still that effective in the 4th quarter. And we're seeing teams that go up against Michigan, those defensive lines are not holding up deep into those games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Michigan can do that.
We got to get out of here. So let me prepare you guys for next week. And this is mainly for Seth, because I know this just upsets his inner sort of spirit when we talk smack about Michigan State. I will lose all professional decorum next week. I want to prepare you for that. I want you to condition your mind, Seth, that when we come back next week and we're talking Michigan State, that it won't be the regular sort of roundtable. It won't be the regular sort of week.
My problem is that they all find me on Twitter and they blame me for things that you say.
No, just point them to me. You can point them to me. Yeah, because I mean, my mission in life that week is to make more Michigan State fans hate me, and I don't know if that's possible, but I'm certainly going to try to find out.
You're very good at it, Sam.
So we are going to have some fun next week. So that's mainly for you, Seth, and for anyone whose sensibilities are offended by us talking about Michigan State and how inept, inadequate, and underserved by their coach that they are. We're going to do all that next week. So look forward to it, guys. Going to have a spirited roundtable and a spirited week next week. You guys are the best. This is right. Exactly, Ben. Regular Sam goes bye-bye. 100% correct. This week in Ohio State week. So we got to get out of here. Fun as always. Thanks for another great roundtable. We will see the rest of you tomorrow on another edition of the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan sports.